And as we start today, I'd like to thank, I believe, members of the Shireen Abu Akleh training program for Palestinian broadcasters and journalists are joining us online. So welcome, and I hope you have a good program. In a short
In a
while,
short while,
that was weird.
that was
In
weird.
a short while,
In a short while,
I'm going to wait to make sure the echo goes. In a short while, I will be joined virtually by our guests from the World Food Programme who will brief you on Hurricane Melissa. WFP's country director for their multi-country Caribbean office, Brian Bogart, will join us from Kingston, and WFP's country director in Cuba, Etienne Labande, will join us from Havana. They will discuss the impact of the hurricane and WFP's response and operations to support those affected. And on that, what I can say is that the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, turning to the impact of Hurricane Melissa in Jamaica, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports that more than 1.5 million people, over half of the country's population, have been affected, facing the loss of their homes and livelihoods. OCHA tells us that infrastructure has been severely damaged. More than 130 roads have been blocked, while power and communication networks have been disrupted. Access to some western parishes remains difficult due to roads being blocked by debris as well as fuel shortages. We and our humanitarian partners continue to support the government's efforts to restore access, strengthen health surveillance, and ensure that life-saving assistance reaches those most in need. Health services are under heavy strain. Several hospitals and clinics were damaged or destroyed, including the hospital in the town of Black River. This has prompted the deployment of an emergency medical team from the Pan American Health Organization, with further support planned. PAHO has also deployed a mental health and psychosocial support specialist to support children and health workers. Hospitals report having only a few days' worth of food supplies, as well as critical shortages of water and fuel for electricity, which are affecting their ability to deliver care. The World Food Programme estimates that up to 360,000 people may require food assistance. Meanwhile, UNICEF and its partners are working to restore safe water and sanitation services, particularly in shelters in affected communities. The OCHA-led UN Disaster Assessment and Coordination Team is coordinating the multiple assistance teams and aid arriving in support of the government. In Haiti, the UN and our partners continue to carry out assessments of the damage wreaked by Hurricane Melissa and are ramping up our efforts to reach people in need. According to the authorities, at least 30 people have died. Joint assessments by the government, the UN, and our humanitarian partners continue in the Grand Anse Department and will expand to other affected departments in the coming days. Despite a severe lack of funding, access challenges, and logistical conditions, we and our partners remain committed to stay and deliver life-saving assistance to those most in need. OCHA continues to work closely with authorities and our partners to ensure a coherent, efficient, and well-coordinated response, facilitating information sharing and supporting collective efforts to reach affected populations. The $908 million humanitarian needs and response plan is just over 20% funded, with $195 million received so far. And in Doha today, the Secretary General met with Cuban Prime Minister Manuel Marrero Cruz. They discussed the impact of climate change on the Caribbean and the devastation left recently by Hurricane Melissa. The Prime Minister commended the United Nations team's response and support to Cuba in these difficult circumstances. The Secretary General assured the Prime Minister of the United Nations solidarity and continued aid to Cuba in this regard. And the Secretary General spoke to the opening session of the Second World Summit for Social Development in Doha, Qatar today. And he warned that today we are at a moment of high global uncertainty, with crises ongoing in terms of poverty, inequality, and climate. He saluted the adopted Doha Political Declaration as a booster shot for development, describing it as a people-centered plan requiring urgent action in 4 areas: accelerating poverty and inequality reduction, job creation, increased financing for developing countries, and greater social inclusion. The declaration, Mr. Guterres said, calls for targeted investments, climate finance, and inclusive governance. The Secretary General urged governments and partners to mobilize the political will and resources to realize the Declaration's ambitious vision for sustainable development. This summit, he said in closing, is all about hope through collective action that is so desperately needed to continue the journey that we began together 30 years ago in Copenhagen. He spoke to the press in Doha about the political declaration, and he also discussed the horrifying crisis in Sudan, which he said is spiraling out of control, and about the continued violations of the ceasefire in Gaza. On Sudan, he said that for over 18 months, El Fasher and the surrounding areas in North Darfur have been an epicenter of suffering, hunger, violence, and displacement. And since the rapid support forces entered El Fasher last weekend, the situation is growing worse by the day. He once again called for an immediate end to this unimaginable violence, for the safe, rapid, and unimpeded delivery of humanitarian aid to all civilians in need, for an end to the flow of weapons and fighters into Sudan, and for an immediate cessation of hostilities. Regarding Gaza, the Secretary General said that all parties must abide by the decisions of the first phase of the peace agreement, and he stressed the need to establish a credible political path towards ending the occupation, realizing the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people, and leading to a two-state solution that enables Israelis and Palestinians to live in peace and security. The transcripts to his press remarks and the readouts of his meetings are now available. And the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, arrives in Doha, Qatar today to attend the Second World Summit for Social Development. The Deputy Secretary General will meet with senior government officials from Qatar and other delegations, as well as civil society representatives, youth, and other stakeholders, to discuss how to translate commitments made at the summit into tangible progress on the ground. The Deputy Secretary General will return to New York on the 9th of November. The Secretary General will depart Qatar on Wednesday to head to Brazil, where he will attend the Belém Climate Summit, which will be held ahead of the 30th UN Climate Change Conference taking place in Belém from November 10th to the 21st. The Secretary General will speak at the opening of the General Plenary of Leaders on Thursday, where he is expected to stress that in this critical moment for our planet and the billions of lives and livelihoods it sustains, every leader must confront some stark truths. Noting that newly submitted nationally determined contributions represent progress, the Secretary General will say that policies and plans governments have put on the table still fall far short of a credible pathway to limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, as agreed by all member states in the Paris Agreement. The truth, the Secretary General will warn, is that the climate crisis is accelerating. The Secretary General will also highlight that another truth is that we have never been better equipped to fight back, emphasizing that this conference of parties must ignite a decade of acceleration and delivery. While in Belém, the Secretary General will also meet with leaders attending the conference, and the Secretary General is expected back in New York on the 9th of November. The UN Environment Program today released a report showing that global warming projections over the century, based on full implementation of nationally determined contributions, are now 2.3 to 2.5 degrees Celsius compared to 2.6 to 2.8 degrees Celsius in last year's report. The report points out that implementing only current policies would lead up to 2.8 degrees Celsius of warming, compared to 3.1 degrees Celsius last year. In a video message, the Secretary General said that the new emissions gap report is clear and uncompromising. He noted that current commitments still point to climate breakdown, adding that scientists tell us that a temporary overshoot above 1.5 degrees is now inevitable, starting at the latest in the early 2030s. But this is no reason to surrender, the Secretary General said. Instead, it's a reason to step up and speed up. He stressed that limiting the rise to 1.5 degrees by the end of the century remains our North Star, and the science is clear. This goal is still within reach, but only if we meaningfully increase our ambition. The full report is available online. Turning to the Gaza Strip, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports that the UN and our humanitarian partners continue scaling up our operations in line with the 60-day response plan. We and our partners continue to move cargo into Gaza and collect supplies from the crossings. Yesterday, we provided some initial information on supplies collected on Sunday, when the UN and our partners picked up 80 truckloads, a total that does not include bilateral and commercial deliveries. Among the cargo collected was food, animal fodder, shelter material, winter clothing, and hygiene items. Our partners report that based on preliminary data, they collected nearly 750 pallets of relief items yesterday from Kerem Shalom, Kerem Abu Salam, and transported them to Gaza City. Another 4 trucks delivered medicine and medical supplies. Congestion and heavy traffic continue to hamper collection efforts. Inside Gaza, since the resumption of our general food distributions on the 13th of October, nearly 1 million people have received assistance through 46 distribution points run by our partners working on food security across the Strip. That's half of the total population. We continue to try to expand this so that this month families can receive 2 monthly food parcels, up from 1 in October. Between mid-October and the Sunday, the UN and our partners collected more than 210 metric tons of animal fodder from the crossings, and the distribution of that supply to some 1,700 herders in Deir el-Bala is almost complete. On Sunday, our partners providing nutrition services collected more than 120,000 packets of fortified cereal, a nutritional supplement to prevent acute malnutrition in children. This supply is sufficient to support large numbers of children for 1 month, which helps to bridge gaps caused by shortages of other supplements. Our partners providing water and sanitation services continue to scale up their responses. On Saturday and Sunday, they distributed over 2,400 hygiene kits and 900 dignity kits, as well as thousands of soap bars, buckets, and jerry cans to displaced families and shelters. They also installed 10 rigid water tanks as community water points to improve delivery. Furthermore, with humanitarian support, the coastal municipality's water utility began rehabilitating 3 water wells supplying neighborhoods in Gaza City. Meanwhile, our partners providing protection support report that their services remain under severe strain due to displacement, damage, and insecurity, with major gaps in the north. Despite this, they continue to respond wherever possible. Yesterday, over 300 children joined protection and rights awareness sessions, while more than 100 adolescents and caregivers received psychosocial support. Another 300 children participated in structured learning activities, while children with disabilities received rehabilitation support. About 775 at-risk children and their families were referred for additional assistance. Also yesterday, more than 700 women and girls took part in psychosocial and first aid sessions in the areas of Khan Yunis, Deir el-Bala, Nuseirat, and Al-Mawasi. Another 500 women in Deir el-Bala and Al-Mawasi area received dignity kits and menstrual health items to reduce health and protection risks. OCHA reminds us that to fully deliver on the 60-day humanitarian plan, the UN and our humanitarian partners need a durable ceasefire, more functional crossings, the lifting of bureaucratic hurdles, safe and viable routes inside Gaza, sustained funding, and unimpeded access, including for NGOs. Turning to the West Bank, the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator Tom Fletcher today appealed for the protection of Palestinians amid reports of ongoing attacks by Israeli settlers across the West Bank. He noted that many of these attacks are related to Palestinians' attempts to harvest their olive crops. Mr. Fletcher stressed that the failure to prevent or punish such attacks is inconsistent with international law, and he called for perpetrators to be held accountable. Turning to Sudan, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that despite the extremely dangerous operating environment, we and our partners continue to deliver life-saving assistance wherever access permits. In Tawila, which is hosting hundreds of thousands of people who fled attacks in and around El Fasher, UNICEF reports that our humanitarian partners have recently reached more than 12,000 people who recently arrived there with safe water, while chlorination activities at 10 public water stations now serve 45,000 people daily. Given the huge scale of needs and severe funding shortfalls, we urge donors to step up their support for the humanitarian response urgently. This aid comes at a critical time. According to the Famine Review Committee, famine conditions are occurring in El Fasher in North Darfur and Kadugli in South Kordofan, towns largely cut off by conflict from commercial supplies and humanitarian assistance. The Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Food Programme, and UNICEF say that across all critically affected regions, the drivers of hunger are clear: conflict, displacement, and blocked humanitarian access. In Tawila, mobile health and nutrition clinics continue to provide services for new arrivals, including screening children under 5 for malnutrition and admitting severe cases to outpatient therapeutic programs. While we and our partners are scaling up therapeutic feeding and vitamin supplementation programs, while efforts continue to ensure safe deliveries and emergency care for pregnant women through mobile clinics. Meanwhile, OCHA warns that violence continues to intensify across North Darfur state. On Sunday, multiple air and drone strikes were reported across the areas of El Fasher, Tina, and Wana Mountain. Local sources continue to report civilian casualties, but these remain unverified, due to limited access and the difficulty of communicating with people in the affected areas. Yesterday, the Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, condemned continued attacks on healthcare in Sudan after the Kernoi Pediatric and Maternity Hospital in North Darfur was struck, resulting in at least 4 deaths, including children, and 3 injuries. He stressed that such attacks on healthcare must stop everywhere. The security situation in the Kordofan region continues to worsen. Local sources report that at least 40 civilians were killed and dozens injured yesterday in an attack on a funeral gathering in El Obeid, the capital of North Kordofan state. Once again, we call for an immediate cessation of hostilities and for all parties to protect civilians and respect international humanitarian law. It also urges all sides to ensure safe and unimpeded passage for humanitarian workers and relief supplies to reach all people in need. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that Madagascar is facing a deepening humanitarian crisis, mainly in the regions of Grand Sud and Grand Sud-Est, which have been hit by a series of droughts, cyclones, and other shocks this year and last. The lingering impact of the recent El Nino drought and cyclone season, combined with a malaria outbreak and strained health systems, has left many communities with little ability to recover. As a result, Madagascar's hunger crisis is intensifying. The number of people facing emergency food insecurity, which is IPC Phase 4 in the Grand Sud region, is expected to quadruple to 110,000 by January 2026. Cases of severe acute malnutrition in the Grand Sud have surged in the past year, affecting nearly 160,000 children. Severe funding cuts have crippled humanitarian operations, forcing our partners, especially in areas of acute humanitarian need, to shut down their activities and leave thousands of people without vital aid. The National Office for Risk and Disaster Management, with support from the UN and our partners, has instituted a national humanitarian response plan. It calls for nearly $185 million to address food insecurity, malnutrition, and disease outbreaks through April 2026. However, with the plan currently facing a $125 million funding gap, we appeal for $85 billion to meet the most urgent humanitarian needs of 1.5 million people. Are there any questions for me before we go to our guests? If I see none, then I'll go to the guests now. All right. Why? Okay, Stefano. Got to be quick on the trigger. Okay.
I see that on the press conference in Doha, the Secretary General underlined the situation in Sudan. Then there were questions. The situation is getting worse, not better. So again, I asked it before, when the Secretary General will write or tell directly to the Security Council that is the time to protect the civilians, then the responsibility to protect and so eventually send also a blue helmet force. Thank you.
Regarding that, I would just refer you to what he said in the press conference. The full transcript, he answered a number of questions. I want again to underline what his priorities are, which is an end to the violence, safe, rapid, and unimpeded delivery of humanitarian aid, an end to the flow of weapons and fighters by any party into Sudan, and an immediate cessation of hostilities. As you're aware, the Security Council is already seized of the matter, and they've been dealing with this. If he feels it's necessary to go to any further steps with the Security Council, he will do so. But right now, he, as well as the envoy, Ramdane Lamamra, have been keeping the Security Council up to date about the situation there.
Yes, I'm sorry for my follow-up, but if I was now one of the civilians trapped in Al-Fasher, okay, I will know. I don't want a press statement from the Security Council. I don't want words. I want actions, because I'm going to die. I'm going to die in an hour, in a day, or 5 days. So while the Security Council is, yes, acknowledging the situation, this is a situation, again, of genocide or whatever, massacre, whatever you want to call it, and hours, not days, are very important. So, again, my question is, does the Secretary General now aware that it's a matter of hours, and so he should push the Security Council to act?
I think it's very clear that the Secretary General is pushing the Security Council, as well as all the nations, including those who have been arming the parties, to act. His words on this have been very strong. Ultimately, what you're asking for is stronger action by the Security Council, and that is something we would like to see as well. But what we're doing from our end is telling them about the severity of the crisis and pushing them to respond. Pam?
Thank you, Farhan. There's a Security Council resolution that the U.S. is circulating. Obviously, it is a decision of the Security Council, but has anyone in the Secretariat been informed or are part of the discussion? It's about an international police force in Gaza. Thank you.
We're aware of this. Obviously, we are not in the Security Council, nor are we a member state. So we're not directly involved in any of this. But the Secretary General made some comments today in Doha about the need for a Security Council approval of an international force, and I would just refer you to what he said in his press conference.
All right, thank you.
All right. Yes, please.
Thank you, Farhan. Do you have any updates on the earthquake in Afghanistan? Thank you.
Well, you heard what we said yesterday about this and our efforts at assessing the damage and our willingness to support the authorities in terms of recovery. And I just refer you back to what I said then. All right. We're now going to be joined virtually by our guests from the World Food Program. First up will be the World Food Program Country Director for the Multi-Country Caribbean Office, Brian Bogart, who will speak to us from Kingston. And after we hear from him, we'll hear from WFP's Country Director in Cuba, Etienne Labande.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that look, you will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest news makers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the U.S. will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry ghats.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HD videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.